Hello, welcome everyone to the Jim Kleiber Show. Today is Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. I'm about 8 minutes late starting. There are proceedings happening in the United States and the U.S. House of Representatives, two impeachment proceedings. Articles of impeachment, I believe the article that they brought was inciting insurrection that they've brought against Donald Trump. And the members of Congress are giving their speeches right now. I believe the vote will happen in a couple hours from now. Also, politically, what's happening is that in Uganda, there is a presidential election and maybe an overall election tomorrow. And I believe a couple days ago, they shut off access to the App Store, the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, and YouTube, and I believe as of today they're starting to shut off access to WhatsApp, any social media or messaging services. In Ethiopia, I believe there's still conflict going on between the Ethiopian government and the province of Tigray up in the north, where they've also shut off communication, as far as I know, still with the province up in the north. And this is just two countries around the world. I believe we are facing lots of conflict and lots of trouble as it relates to, as it's been amplified by COVID-19. It's been there, it just got worse. And lots of people are struggling economically, emotionally, socially, physically, that unfortunately government seems to be the one place where all of our unresolved conflict goes. So if we're struggling with physical health, it's government's fault. If we're struggling with emotional health, it's government's fault. If we're struggling with our bank accounts, it's a government fault. And unfortunately, when we have so much anger and so much frustration with our current personal situations, we can redirect that towards the individuals, the people in government. Yes, I think many times these people are making decisions that cause this. And so even if they do or they don't, if these people are in positions of power, they can rightly sometimes fear that they will have violent repercussions if they leave power, or if they make certain decisions. I was reading that many Republicans in the House are afraid to vote for impeachment because they think, they're receiving death threats already. And so if they were to vote for impeachment, they don't have this incredible amount of protection. They don't have Secret Service walking around with them all the time. Hold on, I'm going to pause, turn the furnace off. Side note, if somebody wants to make a lot of money in the future, make studios or make houses that have studios, like soundproof studios for people to record videos and audios, podcasts, and Zoom calls and things like this with great lighting. Man, if you could figure out how to make studios and houses and do it easy for people, I think many of us would appreciate it, especially the sound. So I think many members of Congress, Republican members of Congress especially, are quite terrified that if they vote their conscience, or they vote what they actually believe in, that people might come and kill them. And, Angus King was on 60 Minutes the other day, and he's an independent senator from Maine. And he was talking about how with COVID, he doesn't fly down to DC, he just takes the drive. And so he takes like an 8-hour drive. From what I can tell, he takes the 8-hour drive by himself with no security detail. And it's just, he's quite vulnerable. If someone is actually afraid for their life, there are many opportunities where one could take advantage of that. And it reminds me a lot of what my friend James D'Angelo talked about, and we talked about on one of the episodes way back. I think it was episode 30 or something, or maybe before that, 32, I think, where this idea of transparency and seeing how all of our members of Congress vote opens them up to being terrorized in many ways. because if someone votes this direction, then they can, if I vote yes instead of no, and somebody wants me to vote no, they can come in and find out how I voted and hold me accountable for it, which in theory is good, but can also lead to people holding them accountable violently. And I think many of our elected officials are fearing that right now, with so much spotlight on how they're voting and who they're voting for. And frankly, so many people filled with anger and rage. So that's just people voting. And James talks a lot about how do we get more confidential votes or secret votes in Congress so that we the donors, we the citizens, we the terrorists in some ways can't terrorize these people, and they're able to vote more clearly and more honestly. Imagine if you were voting for a member of Congress here in the U.S. or even voting for president, and all of your neighbors knew who you voted for. Maybe you have the one neighbor who really, really, really wanted Bernie to get in, and you didn't vote for Bernie, and they could be very angry at you. And if they know that you didn't, and you said you were going to, but you didn't, then they may seek some vengeance on you. Or if the neighbor who wanted you to vote for Biden, or the neighbor who wanted you to vote for Trump, or whoever it may be. There's a reason we went to confidential ballots as citizens, but we haven't gone to confidential ballots for our elected officials. So that's one thing. I believe that we should go to confidential ballots so that they can vote, and so that we care more about how the team performs and rather than how the individual performs. Because I care about the team result. I care about whether the team wins the game or not. I don't really care how the quarterback did or how the receiver did. But maybe we're getting into this era of fantasy politics where we care more about that than we actually do about the game. But the second thing to talk about is that, yes, some members of Congress are afraid of this, and some people are really afraid of losing power. And I talk about this before, and I talk about this a lot with, say, for example, somebody comes into power through a violent coup. This happens in many countries around the world. There's a militia group that's in the bush or whatever, and then they overthrow the government, and then they put their new leader in place. The problem with doing it through violence is that it may make the new leader fear that the next leader is going to do the exact same thing. So by using violence, we can often fear that people are going to use violence against us, which can make us use violence in a preventative manner. So I think that you're going to commit violence against me, so I'm going to do it against you first. And I think we see this a lot in countries that have had violent coups. And so I think about Uganda, and I think somebody who's in president like Museveni, who's been in there for 35 years, 36 years almost, and 35 years, and for him probably feeling terrified that if he's no longer in power, or one, that people are going to take power from him violently, and two, that if he's no longer in power, then people are going to seek the same vengeance or same violence against him that he sought against others to get into that position. And doesn't mean it's true. Just because he believes, or he may believe this, just because he may fear this, doesn't mean it'll actually happen, which I think is very similar to so many white people in the U.S. fearing that, we've had control for so long that if black people or people of color in this country get control, they're going to do the same violent things that we did to them back in the day. I think it's okay to fear that, but I don't think it's necessarily true. We can't really control our fears too much, but this idea that people will meet fire with fire is not necessarily true. And even if it were true, trying to squash them and use more violence against them before they can use violence against us just leads to more violence and more fear. So I think what might be happening in Uganda is that there's a president who knows what he's done to people throughout the years and is probably afraid that other people will do very similar things to him. Probably afraid that if he's no longer in power, that he will no longer have the money, he will no longer have the financial protection, he'll no longer have the physical protection for him or for the people that he cares about. And if I were in a similar situation, I'd be terrified too. Yeah, I wouldn't want to let go of that power. Now, holding on to it and gripping onto it and using violence to prevent a future violence just brings more fear, and just brings more potential of violence, because the more that you hurt other people, the more that other people are likely to respond with trying to hurt you. And so I don't necessarily, I can agree or understand the fear, but that doesn't mean I agree with the actions or the behaviors. I think as men, we get taught that being strong and frankly being violent in some ways is how to be strong and have, to be the tough guy. I don't think that's true at all. I think the tough one, from like a toughness standpoint, tough means I can get punched a lot and I'm still standing here. It's the guy who's in a boxing match. It's like Rocky, if you've seen the Rocky movies. Rocky gets knocked down many times and he gets back up. That's tough for me. Somehow we've conflated tough with being violent. No, tough is, I think, the ability to receive pain and still keep going. For me, that's tough. I think rough is the more violent one. I don't necessarily want to be a rough person. I want to be a tough person. Tough means I'm going to stand strong, and you can hit me as much as you want. It's going to hurt, but I'm going to keep coming back. It's more about resilience and less about outward violence. It's more about withstanding pain instead of causing pain. And then I think strength is very similar. Strength is the ability to move things. Strength is the ability to pick things up. Strength is the ability to move, to do certain movements and to move things. It's not necessarily to punch someone in the face. That's not very strong. Sometimes the strongest thing to do is to resist that, right? Maybe everything in your body says, oh, I want to punch this person. Strength is to resist that. It's almost the ability to resist, resist movements, unwanted movements, So I look at the situation that's happening in Uganda and I see parallels to what's happening in the US. I see two leaders who are very afraid that they have cheated or betrayed people to get to the top, and they're afraid that the chicken is going to come home to roost, as they say. And that's the problem with that's the problem with screwing people over on the way up. And knowing that you're screwing people over is that you can get stuck in a fear that people are going to do the same thing to you. I was talking with a friend who said that he worked in a large corporation and he got his way up to be a managing director. He had 25 people underneath him. And at some point, the people revolted and kind of kicked him out. And what he said to me, I thought was very poignant. He said, at some point, the hunters become the hunted. And it's this idea, if you're going through and you're hunting people and you're basically picking them apart and you're attacking them and you're using them and leveraging them, you're hurting these people, basically. You don't care about them. You see them as objects. Eventually, that may come back to haunt you. And even if it doesn't, the fear will haunt you, will most likely haunt you. And so the fear that people are going to seek vengeance on me can cause us to see people even more distantly and to use them even more. And to if I think somebody's going to hurt me, I'm going to try to hurt them first, because I'm not going to, it's the person, the relationship where somebody's like, well, I think the person's going to dump me, so I'm going to dump them first. I'm not going to let them break up with me and humiliate me. I'm going to humiliate them because I know they're going to do it to me. It's like, whoa, not necessarily. Just because you're afraid that it's going to happen, just because you think it might happen, doesn't mean it will happen. So if I'm a Donald Trump, I'm afraid that if I've maybe probably broken laws when it comes to banking, when it comes to fraud, when it comes to many of these things, when it comes to using the White House, when it comes to certain calls, certain interactions with foreign governments or local governments and stuff like this. I would be terrified that if I get out, they're going to throw me in prison. But the problem is that the terror, the fear can convince someone almost to double down on committing more of these acts that will lead to more fear. And then they almost get stuck in because I say they, because I'm not in that at the moment, but we can almost get stuck in this downward spiral of fear where we do something, it hurts somebody, and we think because we hurt them, they're going to do something to hurt us. So we hurt them again before they can hurt us. And then we keep hurting other people. And then our fear that someone is finally going to cash in their check and hurt us manifests itself in paranoia in some ways. We get so deeply paranoid. Sometimes I'm not saying it's illogical. It makes sense that we, what do they say, the golden rule? Treat others as you wish to be treated. Do unto others as you wish they do unto you, or something. So this principle of reciprocity, yeah, I think it makes sense to fear that. But again, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. And there are steps that we could take to avoid people seeking vengeance on us. And one of them, and one of the most important ones, is remorse. In other words, if I hurt somebody else and I don't feel pain, I don't feel hurt for causing that pain to the other person, then there's more likelihood that the other person might seek vengeance on us, might try to hurt us. But if I hurt somebody and I recognize how much it hurts me to cause that pain to the other person, and I open up and I share that with the other person, typically through apology, through remorse, through talking about the tremendous amount of guilt and pain and shame and embarrassment that we felt, that can help heal, mend the relationship, and prevent future violence coming towards us. It can also help get rid of much of the fear that we have. While the U.S. justice system is highly punitive, meaning that you break the law, you will be punished, there is room for remorse. There is room for pleading guilty. There is room for reconciliation if one goes down that path. But one has to go down that path. The doubling down, the tripling down, the I'm going to fight until the absolute end is going to most likely cause other people to want to fight back. But if we can start to repair relationships, if we can start to resolve conflicts, instead of just kicking them down the road and escalating conflict over and over again, then not only can we maybe prevent these people from seeking vengeance against us and hurting us, but we can also reduce so much of the fear that we're carrying. I mean, I've been talking about it in the political context, but this happens in personal life all the time. We do something to hurt somebody and we don't want to admit it, and it hurts us, but we definitely don't want to admit that. And we're afraid that they're going to do it back to us in a relationship. Oh, maybe one person cheats on the other and they're afraid the other person is going to cheat back. And so therefore, the first person cheats again and again, to try to get ahead of the curve. It doesn't work that way. I don't know. So I hear so many calls, and I myself said this, a call for unity in this country. And I don't think I think real unity is coming together as a team and talking about the real things that we've done to each other and expressing our anger, expressing our pain, and holding people accountable for what they've done. And when I say holding accountable, it's like, listen, Martin Luther King talked about loving your enemies. And I gave a speech, would have been 1 week after Donald Trump got elected. I gave a speech and it was talking about Robert Mercer, Cambridge Analytica, Paul Manafort, many other people, maybe the Russian government, who are involved in Twitter bots and this disinformation campaign. And in that, I repeated a phrase that Martin Luther King said. He says, I love you. I would rather die than hate you. And when Martin Luther King in his speech talked about love, he said Jesus called him to love another person, which doesn't mean to like another person. He says love is to, he says, there are many people I don't like. I don't like how they talk to me. I don't like how they interact with me. But he calls on us to love, to believe in the redemptive goodwill of another human being, to believe in the future, to believe in that the person can turn their things around and change their behaviors. Listen, when I call for unity, I'm not calling for forgetting what people did. I'm not calling for letting these people continue to do these same things to us. Actions have consequences. Listen, if you keep punching me over and over again, I'm going to leave. I may still love you and care about you, but I'm not going to stand here while you keep punching me. Or if you keep punching me, I'm going to grab your hand, I'm going to break your wrist. That doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means I'm not going to let you keep punching me in the face. And sometimes I'm going to do that because if I break your wrist, it's better than, doing something else. So I think this is a call to the people who are in power, who are terrified that others are going to hurt them. There are ways to rebuild the relationship, to repair the relationship, to show remorse for what you've done. And honestly, most of us are quite forgiving when we see remorse. Just when you don't show any remorse, we don't know what to do. You don't feel bad at all for what you've done? Really? Not at all? The biggest problem sometimes in relationships is that we hope that the other person will open up and show their remorse, and the other person's hoping that we'll open up and show our remorse. And somebody's got to start. Somebody's got to apologize first. Somebody's got to show that what we've done to other people to hurt them also hurts us. That's the thing we don't realize about violence, is that when we commit violence to other people and we're aware that we commit violence to other people, when I say violence, like intentionally causing pain to somebody else or trying to hurt somebody else, that it causes pain to us. I hope that we start showing remorse. I hope that we start apologizing. I hope that we start rebuilding this country together. And I hope that we start, that leaders who are stuck in power and who are very afraid of getting out of power recognize the power of an apology, the power of opening up and showing the pain that one feels and the regret and the guilt and the sadness that one feels over their actions and how their actions cause pain and sadness and fear and helplessness to others. Doing that can mend bridges much faster than we sometimes imagine. So, on that note, here's to hoping that leaders in power will open up and share their remorse and feel show some sadness at their actions. And here's to hoping that I and others as well, we start to ponder what we feel guilty for doing, or that we feel sad for doing to others, and that we might be able to lead and open up first. Who knows? All right, y'all, I'm going to get back to the politics and relaxing here on this Wednesday. Take care, y'all.